People vanish, bodies are found, reports are closed, and every time, the same word appears: accidental. But what if that word is hiding more than it explains? From cliffs with warning signs to trails marked safe, from sudden collapses to unexplained falls, the patterns keep repeating. Records disappear into archives. Witnesses are reduced to footnotes. Families are left with gaps that never close. Why do so many deaths follow the same script? Who decides when questions stop being asked? And what details never make it into public view? Tonight, we follow the paper trail, the silence, and the moments nobody can fully explain. The paper trail behind an accidental label. In many national parks, the first public description of a fatal event arrives as a short line in a news release, an incident log, or a sheriff's update. The language is often narrow. A person is said to have fallen, collapsed, or been struck, with the word accidental appearing early, sometimes before a complete report is available. The phrase reads like a conclusion, but in practice, it often functions as an administrative category, a preliminary manner of death ruling, or a shorthand based on what responders could observe in the first hours after arrival. Within the National Park Service, incident classification follows formal internal procedures. Safety manuals describe how an accident is recorded after an unplanned event results in injury, illness, or death. These documents outline notification chains, reporting thresholds, and investigative responsibilities. A serious accident is defined to include a work-related fatality involving employees or supervised personnel, triggering immediate reporting requirements. Although these guidelines are written primarily for workplace incidents, they reflect a broader institutional preference for standardized categories that guide how information moves through the system. Visitor fatalities operate under a different framework. Rangers may respond, coordinate rescue attempts, and document scenes, but the legal determination of manner of death is usually made by a county coroner or medical examiner. This division shapes public communication. When there is no immediate indication of criminal activity, park officials may describe a death as appearing accidental, while emphasizing that an investigation is ongoing. The wording signals administrative status rather than final judgment. In July 2024 at Grand Canyon National Park, officials reported that a 20-year-old man fell approximately 400 feet from Pipe Creek Overlook. The initial statement focused on location, estimated distance, and the recovery effort. It noted that the National Park Service and local authorities were investigating. No detailed reconstruction was included. The early description framed the event as an apparent accidental fall, based on visible evidence and terrain. A similar pattern appeared in October 2024 at Zion National Park. A 40-year-old canyoneer died after falling between 150 and 200 feet near the exit of Heaps Canyon. Park officials reported that the group held a valid permit and had followed an approved route. The statement described the death as an accidental fall and provided the time of day, approximate location, and rescue response. The account remained limited to logistical details. Not all fatal incidents involve steep terrain. Some occur during routine hikes on heavily traveled routes. In January 2024, a 63-year-old man collapsed near Scout Lookout, in Zion's West Rim area. Bystanders attempted CPR before rangers and paramedics arrived. The man was pronounced dead at the scene. Early reports described the incident as a medical emergency and later as an accidental or natural death. Because the determining evidence was clinical rather than environmental, fewer physical details appeared in public summaries. Other deaths involve environmental hazards that are unpredictable and not directly linked to risky behavior. In July 2024 at Yosemite National Park, a 29-year-old hiker, Angela Lynn, was struck by a falling tree branch while walking on the Tuolumne Grove Trail. Reports described a brief stop along the trail and the sudden failure of a large limb. Investigators later concluded that the injuries were consistent with an accidental impact. The location was accessible and well marked. No warnings specific to falling branches were present. The classification reflected the absence of human intent. Parks also maintain internal records that rarely receive public attention. The National Park Service's Morning Report archive contains short summaries of incidents submitted by park staff. These entries often include the phrase "ruled accidental" alongside minimal contextual information. A Yosemite entry from a previous decade describes a visitor who became lost in Tenaya Canyon, slipped on wet granite, and fell approximately 150 feet. The report lists the terrain conditions, the recovery method, and the ruling. It does not explore personal background or decision-making. The way an accidental designation moves through official systems can be seen in the agency's record-keeping infrastructure. The Department of the Interior maintains a centralized case incident reporting system used by the National Park Service. This database contains information about complainants, witnesses, victims, and involved parties in law enforcement and certain non-criminal cases. Records are organized by names, dates, locations, and case numbers. Although many of these files are exempt from public release, their existence explains why press statements are brief. Detailed narratives often remain inside restricted reports. Public summaries tend to rely on measurable elements. These include estimated fall distances, precise times, weather conditions, and named landmarks. In 2013, after a fatal fall near the top of Vernal Fall in Yosemite, officials described the recovery of a visitor and characterized the death as accidental. Reports identified the waterfall, the cliff area, and the search process. They did not reconstruct the moments before the fall. The language focused on what could be verified. In some cases, the accidental label is reinforced through multiple agencies. Local media coverage of Grand Canyon fatalities often quotes both park officials and county authorities. One report described a visitor who had gone off trail and fallen more than 200 feet. Rangers observed footprints leading beyond marked paths. The county later confirmed the death as accidental. The narrative emerged through successive statements, rather than a single, comprehensive account. Across these examples, the same word carries different institutional meanings. For park officials, accidental often indicates that no signs of violence or intentional self-harm were observed and that the mechanism appears unintentional. For medical examiners, accident is one of several legally defined manners of death, distinct from homicide, suicide, natural causes, and undetermined. For law enforcement officers, the focus remains on documenting observations and witness statements. For public affairs staff, the goal is to provide timely information without exceeding confirmed facts. The timing of statements also shapes perception. Press releases are frequently issued within hours of recovery, sometimes before toxicology results, equipment inspections, or detailed scene analyses are complete. Early classifications are therefore provisional. They may later be confirmed, amended, or supplemented in internal files without public updates. Administrative convenience plays a role as well. Categorizing a death as accidental allows reports to follow established workflows. It determines which offices receive copies, which databases are updated, and which reviews are required. In this sense, the term functions as a routing instruction as much as a descriptive judgment. The physical geography of national parks reinforces this pattern. Many locations involve cliffs, fast-moving water, loose rock, or unstable vegetation. When a person is found below an overlook, near a waterfall, or at the base of a canyon wall, gravity provides an immediate explanatory framework. Unless contradictory evidence appears, the fall is recorded as accidental. The terrain itself becomes part of the classification process. Witness accounts also influence early labeling. When companions report slips, loss of footing, sudden illness, or equipment failure, these statements enter ranger logs and shape initial conclusions. Even when accounts are incomplete or second-hand, they often serve as the first narrative layer attached to a case. Over time, these practices produce a consistent public record. Short announcements, limited detail, a focus on location and mechanism. The repeated use of accidental becomes familiar to readers and viewers. It signals closure, even when investigations are ongoing. Yet within agency systems, the term remains embedded in forms, databases, and procedural checklists. In this structure, the label does not arise from a single decision. It emerges from overlapping responsibilities among rangers, emergency responders, medical examiners, and administrators. Each contributes a piece. The final public description reflects the narrow zone where these roles intersect. A landscape measured in small, repeated risks. Across the national park system, fatal incident records show that many deaths occur in places that appear ordinary on visitor maps. These locations are not hidden or restricted. They are overlooks with railings, riverbanks beside marked trails, narrow paths carved into slopes, and open granite domes visible from parking areas. Over time, these settings accumulate reports that resemble one another in form, even when separated by years and hundreds of miles. At the rim of the Grand Canyon, for example, incident files frequently reference named viewpoints such as Yavapai Point, Mather Point, and Toraweep Overlook. These areas are designed for observation. They include stone walls, metal barriers, and warning signs, yet reports continue to describe visitors stepping beyond marked edges, standing on loose rock, or sitting near drop-offs. When falls occur, documentation focuses on distance, recovery location, and access routes used by rescue teams. In Yosemite National Park, a similar pattern appears near waterfalls and polished granite surfaces. Vernal Fall, Nevada Fall, and the Merced River corridor are repeatedly listed in fatality summaries. During spring and early summer, snowmelt increases water volume and spray. Granite surfaces become slick. Rangers record incidents in which visitors lose footing while walking on rocks near the river or while climbing onto boulders for photographs. Reports often note wet conditions and smooth stone textures. Zion National Park's narrow canyons and cliffside trails generate another cluster of recurring entries. Angel's Landing, Observation Point, and technical canyons such as Heaps and Imlay appear frequently in rescue and fatality logs. These routes involve chains, exposed switchbacks, and vertical drops. Many incidents occur during descents rather than ascents. Documentation commonly mentions fatigue, afternoon storms, or diminishing daylight as contributing environmental factors. River corridors form a separate category of repeated risk. In parks such as Yellowstone, Great Smoky Mountains, and Rocky Mountain, incident records describe drownings near popular fishing spots and scenic pullouts. Water temperature, current speed, and submerged rocks are often included in summaries. In some cases, victims entered water to retrieve objects or cool off. In others, they slipped from banks or logs. The setting is described precisely, but personal intention is rarely detailed. High-altitude terrain introduces additional variables. At Mount Rainier and Denali, official reports document deaths related to avalanches, crevasse falls, and altitude-related illness. These incidents involve experienced climbers as well as first-time visitors. Weather shifts, visibility changes, and snow stability assessments appear in ranger narratives. Fatalities in these environments are often classified as mountaineering accidents, even when multiple factors are present. Desert parks show different but equally consistent patterns. In Death Valley and Joshua Tree, records include deaths from heat exposure, dehydration, and falls among rock formations. Temperatures, vehicle locations, and last known water supplies are routinely noted. The surrounding terrain is described in terms of distance from roads and trailheads. Forested environments generate their own recurring entries. In Great Smoky Mountains National Park, dense vegetation and uneven ground appear in reports involving missing hikers, later found deceased. Causes include falls, hypothermia, and medical events. Search documentation often lists grid coordinates, canopy cover, and drainage patterns. Tree cover is mentioned because it affects visibility and radio communication. Coastal parks present hazards linked to tides and wave action. At Point Reyes and Olympic National Park, fatalities have been recorded near cliff edges and tide pools. Incident files describe sudden wave surges, unstable cliffs, and narrow access routes. Timing relative to tide charts and weather forecasts is included in official narratives. In each of these settings, warning systems are present. Signs, brochures, and visitor center displays outline risks. Railings mark many overlooks. Trail descriptions include difficulty ratings. Permits are required for technical routes. Despite these measures, the same locations continue to appear in annual summaries. The repetition suggests that hazard awareness does not remove exposure. It shapes behavior but does not eliminate contact with dangerous terrain. Incident documentation reflects this reality through its structure. Reports tend to begin with a location reference, followed by a description of terrain and conditions. They then note the discovery of the individual and the actions taken by responders. Environmental factors are described in neutral terms. Wind speed, water level, temperature, and surface condition are recorded as observational data. Seasonal patterns are visible in compiled records. Spring brings increased water-related incidents. Summer shows higher numbers of falls and heat-related deaths. Autumn reports include hunting-related accidents in parks where regulated hunting occurs nearby. Winter entries reference avalanches, icy trails, and vehicle accidents on mountain roads. These trends repeat annually with minor variation. Visitor behavior intersects with these patterns in predictable ways. Photographs taken near edges, off-trail exploration, and attempts to shortcut switchbacks are occasionally mentioned in ranger narratives. However, such details are not consistently included. Unless documented by witnesses or recovered devices, personal actions remain secondary to physical context. Mapping tools used by park staff reinforce geographic repetition. Incident locations are entered into databases using standardized coordinates. Over time, clusters emerge. Rangers and safety officers can identify hotspots where rescues and recoveries are common. These areas receive additional signage or seasonal advisories. Even so, fatal incidents continue to occur within them. Infrastructure constraints play a role. Many dangerous areas cannot be fully fenced without altering landscapes protected by preservation mandates. Railings are limited to developed viewpoints. Remote cliffs, riverbanks, and alpine ridges remain open. Reports from these zones reflect minimal physical intervention. Transportation corridors also appear in fatality records. Vehicle accidents on park roads account for a significant portion of deaths. In Yellowstone, Grand Teton, and Glacier, reports describe collisions with wildlife, loss of control on icy surfaces, and single vehicle rollovers. Speed, weather, and road condition are noted. These incidents are classified as accidental despite occurring on managed infrastructure. Over time, these varied settings form a composite map of ordinary danger. Each point represents a specific environment interacting with human presence. The language used in reports treats these interactions as situational events rather than anomalies. The repetition is visible only when cases are viewed together. This cumulative pattern influences how later incidents are interpreted. When a death occurs at a site with prior history, responders recognize familiar terrain features and logistical challenges. Recovery plans draw on earlier operations. Documentation follows established templates. The setting itself becomes part of the institutional memory. Within this framework, fatal reports remain focused on place. Coordinates, trail names, elevation, and distances dominate descriptions. Personal narratives, when present, are brief. The geography carries the explanatory weight. From field notes to official timelines. Ranger reports begin as handwritten notes, radio logs, and digital timestamps. These fragments are produced during active response, often in unstable conditions. A call time is recorded by dispatch. Arrival is marked by GPS. Weather is logged from portable instruments or nearby stations. Names are taken from identification documents or companions. These elements exist first as isolated entries rather than as a coherent narrative. At a search and rescue incident in Rocky Mountain National Park in September 2023, for example, internal documentation showed separate time entries for a hiker's overdue report, helicopter deployment, ground team insertion, and visual contact. Each line corresponded to a specific action. Only later were these elements arranged into a continuous account. The final file listed times in sequence, without commentary on emotional state or decision-making. The conversion from notes to timeline follows standardized practices. After an incident, lead rangers compile materials from multiple sources. These include dispatch recordings, body camera footage, witness statements, medical response forms, and recovery logs. Each item is reviewed for time references. When times conflict, priority is usually given to dispatch systems and GPS records, which are considered more reliable than memory-based estimates. In Yosemite, after a fatal fall near Glacier Point in 2022, internal summaries showed that 3 separate arrival times were recorded by different responders. The final report adopted the dispatch timestamp as official. The other estimates were retained in supplementary files but excluded from the main chronology. This practice reflects a preference for uniform reference points rather than narrative completeness. Once times are aligned, movements are reconstructed. A person's last known location is established through trail registers, vehicle placement, cell phone pings when available, and companion accounts. Distances are measured using park mapping software. Elevation changes are calculated automatically. The resulting sequence resembles a route log more than a personal journey. Medical information enters the timeline through standardized forms. Paramedics and emergency medical technicians document pulse, respiration, and response to treatment at specific minutes. These data points are inserted into the broader sequence. If a death occurs before medical contact, the timeline skips directly from discovery to pronouncement by a qualified authority. Coroner and medical examiner inputs arrive later. Autopsy times, toxicology submission dates, and certification entries are appended. These additions are often weeks apart from the original incident. In the compiled file, they appear as brief terminal entries rather than as extended analyses. Witness statements are summarized rather than transcribed. Rangers extract time-related content and remove descriptive passages that cannot be verified. A sentence such as, "He seemed tired and confused," may be reduced to subject-reported fatigue. Emotional language is filtered out. The focus remains on observable actions and timing. Technology has increased the density of time markers. Body-worn cameras record continuous video with embedded timestamps. Vehicle trackers log speed and location. Rescue helicopters generate flight data automatically. These systems feed into reports as numerical sequences. Human observation becomes one layer among many. At Yellowstone in 2021, during a fatal thermal area incident, investigators used camera footage from nearby boardwalks to determine movement patterns. The final timeline included exact minutes when the individual stepped off designated paths and when staff initiated response. Personal motivations were absent. The record emphasized spatial and temporal deviation. The structure of these timelines reflects legal and administrative needs. In potential litigation or public records requests, agencies must demonstrate that protocols were followed. Response time, communication intervals, and handoff moments are therefore highlighted. Narrative depth is secondary to procedural clarity. Formatting conventions reinforce this orientation. Many reports use paragraph blocks beginning with times, followed by short factual clauses. Others use tables that list date, time, action, and personnel. Each sentence anchors itself to a moment. Language choice is restrained. Verbs are functional: arrived, observed, contacted, transported, notified. Adjectives are limited. Environmental descriptors appear only when relevant to safety assessments, such as icy, unstable, or low visibility. When incidents involve extended searches, timelines can span days. In Great Smoky Mountains National Park, a 2019 missing hiker case produced a file covering 11 days of operations. Each entry documented grid searches, canine deployments, and weather interruptions. When remains were found, the timeline shifted abruptly to recovery and transport. Earlier uncertainties were not revisited. Multiple agencies complicate chronology. County sheriffs, volunteer rescue groups, and air support units maintain separate logs. During consolidation, overlapping entries are merged. Conflicting timestamps are resolved through consultation. The resulting document presents a single, unified sequence. Revisions are common. Draft timelines circulate among supervisors and legal advisors. Errors in time conversion, particularly between local and standardized formats, are corrected. Missing entries are added when new data emerges. Each revision reduces ambiguity but also narrows narrative scope. Public versions are further condensed. Press summaries usually extract only a few key moments. Report received, subject located, death pronounced. Intermediate steps are omitted. The detailed internal sequence remains inaccessible to most readers. This process affects how deaths are remembered institutionally. Over time, individuals become associated with timestamps rather than with personal histories. A name is linked to a discovery hour, a recovery coordinate, and a certification date. These identifiers persist in databases long after contextual information fades. Training materials reflect this emphasis. New rangers learn to document actions precisely and immediately. They are instructed to record times even during high-stress situations. Accuracy is framed as a professional obligation. Narrative reflection is not part of the protocol. Digital systems now automate portions of this work. Incident management software generates templates with required time fields. Users cannot submit reports without completing them. The structure guides attention towards sequence rather than interpretation. In this environment, uncertainty is managed through notation. When a time is unknown, reports state approximate or unknown. These qualifiers are standardized. They acknowledge gaps without expanding on causes. The timeline remains intact, even when segments are incomplete. The cumulative effect is a form of documentation that privileges order. Events are placed into linear arrangements that emphasize response efficiency and procedural adherence. Personal experiences, motivations, and subjective perceptions remain largely external to the official record. As files are archived, these timelines become the primary reference for future inquiries. Researchers, administrators, and reviewers encounter sequences of actions rather than stories. The format shapes understanding by default. Through this mechanism, deaths in national parks are converted into institutional time structures. They are preserved as coordinated movements across hours and days. The human presence within them is recorded indirectly, through motion and measurement. Statements, summaries, and the narrowing of testimony. Interviews in fatal incident investigations usually begin in informal settings. Companions may be seated in ranger stations, parked vehicles, visitor centers, or temporary shelters. Witnesses are often approached on trails or near trailheads. Initial conversations are recorded in notebooks or digital recorders. At this stage, accounts are unstructured. People speak in extended sentences, return to earlier moments, and describe sensory impressions alongside actions. A hiker who witnessed a fall in Yosemite in 2021 described hearing loose gravel, seeing a sudden movement, and then losing sight of the person below a ledge. In early notes, these observations appeared as full paragraphs. In later summaries, the same account was reduced to a short entry, stating that the witness observed the subject slip and fall after stepping on unstable material. Rangers conducting interviews follow established guidelines. They ask for names, contact information, location, time, and relationship to the individual. Open-ended questions may be used at first, but later stages focus on verification. Interviewers seek consistency between statements, dispatch records, and physical evidence. When discrepancies appear, follow-up questions narrow the range of acceptable detail. Audio recordings are not always retained in permanent files. In many cases, only written summaries are preserved. These are prepared by the interviewing ranger or investigator after the conversation concludes. Memory, contemporaneous notes, and selected quotations shape the final version. Length is limited by reporting formats and supervisory review. Companion accounts often receive particular attention. Individuals who are traveling with the deceased are asked to describe the entire itinerary. Questions cover departure times, rest breaks, equipment, food, water, and route choices. These narratives can span hours when spoken. In official files, they are frequently condensed into chronological outlines, listing major transitions between locations. At Grand Teton National Park in 2020, a climbing partner provided a detailed explanation of rope placement, anchor setup, and communication signals before a fatal fall. The investigative summary preserved only the technical sequence relevant to equipment inspection. Personal reflections and emotional reactions were excluded. Bystander testimony follows a similar pattern. Visitors who happen to observe an incident are asked to recount what they saw. These witnesses may include tourists unfamiliar with terrain or park procedures. Their statements often contain uncertainty, such as unclear distances or directions. During review, uncertain elements are either removed or rephrased in neutral terms. Written summaries tend to avoid first-person language. Phrases like "I saw" or "we heard" are replaced with "the witness reported" or "according to the companion." It frames testimony as reported data rather than as personal narrative. In incidents involving multiple witnesses, overlapping accounts are compared. Investigators look for points of convergence. Shared details, such as approximate time or location, are prioritized. Unique or contradictory elements may be omitted unless supported by physical evidence. The resulting summary reflects consensus rather than diversity of perspective. Medical responders also provide statements. Paramedics and emergency technicians document observations about injuries, responsiveness, and treatment. These reports are structured and standardized. When incorporated into case files, they are rarely altered. Their technical language contrasts with the more variable tone of civilian testimony. Family members are sometimes interviewed if they were present or had recent contact. These conversations may address recent health, stress, or travel plans. In official summaries, such information appears selectively. Only details with perceived relevance to timing or physical condition are retained. Legal considerations influence this process. Statements are written with potential public disclosure and litigation in mind. Speculative language is avoided. Assertions that cannot be corroborated are minimized. Interviewers are trained to document facts rather than interpretations. Translation adds another layer. In parks with international visitors, interviews may occur through interpreters. The final English summary reflects the interpreter's phrasing and the investigator's interpretation. Original speech patterns rarely appear in the record. Digital communication increasingly enters files. Text messages, social media posts, and call logs are sometimes reviewed. Companions may provide screenshots showing last communications. Investigators extract timestamps and brief content. Longer conversational threads are summarized rather than reproduced. In extended investigations, witnesses may be contacted multiple times. Follow-up interviews clarify earlier points. Each subsequent summary tends to be shorter. Initial richness is replaced by targeted confirmation. Over time, the record converges toward a simplified account. Training materials for rangers emphasize objectivity in report writing. Officers are instructed to separate observation from opinion. Adjectives describing emotional states are discouraged unless directly observed and relevant. This guidance shapes how interviews are translated into text. Supervisory review further narrows content. Draft reports are checked for clarity, relevance, and consistency. Sections deemed extraneous are removed. The goal is a document that aligns with agency standards and withstands external scrutiny. Public information officers rely on these internal summaries when preparing statements. As a result, condensed witness accounts influence media coverage. A brief phrase in a press release may originate from hours of conversation reduced to a single clause. Over time, this process produces uniformity. Different incidents, involving different people, generate reports with similar structure and vocabulary. Testimony is filtered through institutional expectations. Individual voices become secondary to procedural format. Archival systems reinforce this outcome. Databases store summaries as text fields with character limits. Older handwritten notes may be scanned and archived separately, but they are rarely consulted. The searchable record favors standardized entries. Researchers who later access released files encounter these condensed versions. They see statements as fragments rather than as full narratives. The absence of original speech is not always evident. The summaries appear complete because they follow familiar formats. This narrowing does not imply deliberate distortion. It reflects administrative priorities. Extended narrative is difficult to maintain within operational systems. As a result, testimony in national park fatality cases is transformed. Spoken recollections become brief textual references. Emotional tone, uncertainty, and personal perspective are reduced. What remains is a streamlined account aligned with timelines, maps, and procedural records. Through this transformation, witness experiences are integrated into official files as controlled elements. They support chronology and classification. They rarely stand alone as independent narratives. Medical findings and the limits of public disclosure. After recovery and transport, responsibility for determining cause and manner of death shifts away from park staff. The body is transferred to a county medical examiner or coroner, depending on local jurisdiction. This handover is documented in incident files with date, time, and receiving authority. From that point forward, medical evaluation proceeds under state public health and forensic regulations rather than federal park policy. Autopsies are not automatic. In many jurisdictions, the examiner first reviews scene reports, medical history, and witness summaries. If circumstances appear straightforward, such as a witnessed fall with severe trauma, a full autopsy may be deemed unnecessary. Instead, an external examination and limited internal assessment may be performed. This decision affects how much information is later available. When full autopsies are conducted, they follow standardized protocols. Examiners document height, weight, identifying marks, and clothing. Internal organs are inspected for injury or disease. Skeletal fractures are measured and photographed. Tissue samples may be retained. Each step is recorded in technical language intended for professional use rather than public interpretation. Toxicology testing is a routine component. Blood, urine, and sometimes tissue samples are sent to laboratories for analysis. Screens typically include alcohol, common prescription medications, illicit substances, and selected environmental toxins. Turnaround time can range from several weeks to several months, depending on backlog and testing scope. During this period, park case files often remain incomplete. Incident summaries may include a notation such as awaiting toxicology or pending medical examiner report. Public statements rarely reference these delays. Instead, they continue to rely on environmental and situational descriptions. When results are returned, they are incorporated into official death certificates. These certificates list immediate cause, contributing factors, and manner of death. The wording follows nationally standardized formats. For example, blunt force trauma due to fall from height or hypothermia due to environmental exposure may appear as primary entries. Underlying medical conditions may also be noted. Heart disease, diabetes, or respiratory disorders sometimes appear as contributing factors. In files, these details are treated as clinical context. They are rarely highlighted in park communications unless directly relevant to safety messaging. Privacy laws shape what can be released. Medical examiner records are subject to state-level confidentiality statutes. In many regions, full autopsy reports are exempt from public disclosure or require formal requests. Even when released, sections may be redacted to protect personal health information. Park public affairs offices, therefore, work from limited material. They may receive a short summary stating cause and manner without supporting detail. Complex findings are reduced to brief phrases. In 2022, after a fatal heat-related incident in Death Valley, county authorities listed hypothermia and dehydration as causes of death. The accompanying toxicology report showed no significant substances. Only the primary conclusion appeared in park statements. Laboratory data and internal measurements remained confidential. Medical findings can complicate early classifications. In some cases, a death initially described as accidental may later be listed as natural due to cardiac events triggered by exertion. Conversely, apparent medical collapses may be linked to environmental exposure after examination. These revisions are recorded in certificates, but are not always reflected in public narratives. Timing contributes to this gap. Press coverage usually peaks within days of an incident. Autopsy and toxicology results arrive long after public attention has shifted. Updated information may be posted quietly or not at all. Administrative records, however, are amended. Equipment and safety gear are sometimes examined alongside medical evaluation. Helmets, harnesses, flotation devices, and footwear may be inspected for damage. These assessments are conducted by technical specialists, not medical examiners, but their findings are appended to case files. Public summaries rarely mention them unless malfunction is confirmed. In aviation-assisted rescues, pilot and crew medical evaluations are also documented if injuries occur. These records are separate from visitor files and are governed by occupational health regulations. They remain internal unless litigation arises. Autopsy language is highly specific. Terms such as laceration, contusion, hemorrhage, and organ rupture appear frequently. In public versions, these are often translated into broader expressions like severe injuries. The shift reduces technical precision but increases general readability. In drowning cases, additional complexities arise. Examiners assess lung fluid, diatom presence, and airway condition. Determining whether drowning occurred before or after trauma can be difficult. Reports may list drowning with contributing blunt force injury. Public statements usually simplify this to drowned after falling. Altitude-related deaths involve evaluation of pulmonary or cerebral edema. These findings require specialized interpretation. In mountaineering incidents, such medical conclusions are sometimes summarized as altitude illness, without elaboration. Detailed pathology remains in restricted reports. Mental health considerations are handled cautiously. If evidence suggests intentional self-harm, manner of death may be classified as suicide. Parks often avoid detailed public discussion of such cases. Statements may use general language or decline comment. This restraint aligns with suicide reporting guidelines and privacy standards. Family access to reports varies by state. Next of kin may receive full documentation upon request. In some jurisdictions, they are automatically notified of findings. In others, they must file formal applications. This process occurs independently of park administration. Legal proceedings influence disclosure. When wrongful death claims or liability cases are filed, medical records become part of discovery. At that stage, previously confidential information may enter court filings. Outside of litigation, access remains limited. Historical case files show similar patterns. In archival, Yosemite records from the 1970s and 1980s, cause of death statements are brief, often one sentence long. Supporting medical documentation is absent or sealed. The modern system is more detailed internally, but public visibility remains narrow. Training for park staff reflects this separation. Rangers are instructed not to speculate about medical causes when speaking to media. They are advised to defer to county authorities. This guidance reinforces institutional boundaries. Statistical summaries published by agencies aggregate medical findings into broad categories. Annual fatality reports may list percentages for falls, drownings, medical events, and vehicle accidents. Individual pathologies are not discussed. These compilations shape public understanding at a high level. Over time, medical data become detached from personal context. Files store laboratory values, anatomical observations, and certification codes. The record emphasizes classification and compliance. This structure does not imply concealment. It reflects overlapping legal, ethical, and administrative constraints. Medical information is governed by rules distinct from land management or visitor safety. Within national park fatality investigations, the medical component therefore operates on parallel tracks. Detailed analysis occurs in specialized institutions. Park records receive filtered conclusions. Public communication receives further condensed versions. As a result, health-related factors are present in official systems, but rarely visible in full. They inform internal closure of cases while remaining peripheral in public narratives. Records, requests, and the architecture of access. Long after an incident ends, its documentation enters a system designed for storage rather than storytelling. Reports, photographs, audio files, medical summaries, and correspondence are uploaded, scanned, or catalogued into databases managed by federal and local agencies. Each item is assigned identifiers. Case numbers, file paths, retention schedules, and access codes determine where information resides and who may retrieve it. Within the National Park Service, most fatal incident records are managed through a combination of internal law enforcement systems, administrative archives, and regional offices. Field reports are submitted electronically or as scanned documents. Supporting materials are attached. Once reviewed, files are locked to prevent further modification. Amendments require supervisory approval. County authorities maintain parallel systems. Coroner's offices, sheriff departments, and emergency services store their own records. These include death certificates, autopsy reports, dispatch logs, and investigative notes. Integration between federal and county systems is limited. Each agency retains custody of its own material. Federal records are governed by the Federal Records Act. This law establishes retention periods based on document type. Some incident reports must be preserved permanently. Others are scheduled for destruction after a set number of years. Archival classification determines whether a file is transferred to long-term repositories, such as the National Archives. Digital storage has altered these practices. Older cases were once held in paper folders stored in regional warehouses. Today, most new files exist primarily in electronic form. Servers maintain redundant backups. Access is controlled through credentialed accounts. Logging systems record every retrieval and download. Public access operates through formal mechanisms. The Freedom of Information Act allows individuals to request federal records. Each request must be submitted in writing, specifying the documents sought. Agencies are required to acknowledge receipt and assign tracking numbers. Deadlines are set by statute, though extensions are common. FOIA officers review each request. They identify relevant files and assess them for exempt material. Personal information, medical data, and certain law enforcement details are protected. Portions of documents may be redacted. In some cases, entire files are withheld. The review process is layered. Initial screening is conducted by records specialists. Legal counsel may examine sensitive cases. Supervisors approve final releases. Each stage adds time. Simple requests may be completed in weeks. Complex cases can take years. State-level public records laws govern county and municipal files. These statutes vary widely. Some states treat autopsy reports as public, others restrict access. Fees, response times, and appeal procedures differ. Researchers seeking comprehensive documentation often submit parallel requests. One may be filed with the National Park Service, another with the county coroner, a third with the local sheriff. Each yields different material. Integration is left to the requester. Released documents frequently arrive in fragmented form. Pages may be missing, attachments may be referenced but not included, audio recordings may be converted into transcripts, photographs may be reduced in resolution. Metadata is sometimes stripped. Redactions shape interpretation. Names of witnesses are often removed. Phone numbers and addresses are blacked out. Medical terminology may be partially obscured. These edits are marked with exemption codes, but the underlying content remains inaccessible. Appeal procedures exist. If a requester believes information was improperly withheld, they may file an administrative appeal. In some cases, disputes proceed to federal court. Litigation can result in additional disclosures, though often after long delays. Archival access follows different rules. Older records transferred to national or regional archives may become publicly available after declassification periods expire. However, personal privacy exemptions may still apply. Researchers accessing these collections work under reading room regulations and copying restrictions. Internal access is also regulated. Not all park employees can view full case files. Permissions are role-based. Law enforcement staff may access investigative materials. Administrative personnel may see summaries. Public affairs officers receive limited extracts. Segmentation reduces internal exposure. Budgetary constraints affect availability. FOIA offices are often understaffed. Backlogs accumulate. Priority is given to high-profile or legally mandated requests. Routine inquiries may remain pending for extended periods. Standardization influences what can be retrieved. Digital forms require completion of specific fields. If information was never entered into those fields, it cannot be easily extracted. Narrative attachments may be stored as scanned images that are not searchable. Record-keeping software evolves. When systems are upgraded, data migration occurs. Some older formats become obsolete. Files may be converted, compressed, or reorganized. During these transitions, minor losses or inconsistencies can occur. Historical records illustrate these effects. Researchers examining park fatalities from the mid-20th century often find incomplete files. Dispatch logs may be missing. Photographs may be absent. Correspondence may have been discarded. Surviving documents reflect earlier administrative priorities. Modern cases generate more data, but also more filters. Body camera footage, GPS tracks, and digital communications expand the evidentiary base. At the same time, privacy regulations restrict distribution. More information exists than ever, yet less is visible. Third-party contractors introduce additional layers. Rescue services, helicopter operators, and forensic laboratories maintain independent records. Access to these files depends on contractual terms and separate legal frameworks. They are not automatically included in federal disclosures. Media organizations maintain their own archives. Journalists who cover incidents may retain interviews and documents. These private collections can preserve material no longer available through official channels. Access depends on editorial policy. Families encounter similar structures. Requests from next of kin are processed through formal channels. Identification documents and proof of relationship are required. Others are subject to the same redactions as public requests. Training for records officers emphasizes compliance. Staff are instructed to apply exemptions consistently and document justification for each redaction. Performance is evaluated partly on accuracy and adherence to policy rather than on speed of release. Indexes and finding aids determine discoverability. Databases classify incidents by date, location, and general category. They rarely include detailed subject descriptors. A requester must often know approximate time and place to locate relevant files. As a result, access is shaped by architecture. Systems are designed for internal management and legal compliance. Public transparency is accommodated within those constraints. The structure determines what can be seen. Over time, patterns of availability emerge. Some parks become well documented through repeated requests. Others remain opaque. Differences reflect staffing, administrative culture, and historical practice. The accumulation of files does not automatically produce collective understanding. Documents remain dispersed across agencies and formats. Each retrieval yields partial views. Comprehensive reconstruction requires sustained effort. Within this framework, records function less as narratives and more as regulated assets. They are created, stored, released, and restricted according to institutional rules. These rules persist regardless of individual cases. Through this architecture, information about deaths in national parks is preserved in controlled forms. Access is mediated by law, technology, and administrative process. What reaches the public is shaped as much by these systems as by the events themselves. Language in press releases and official briefings. Public statements about fatalities in national parks are produced through a coordinated administrative process. They are not written at the scene and rarely by the first responders. Instead, drafts are prepared by public affairs staff using information supplied by rangers, supervisors, and investigative summaries. These drafts move through review channels before release. The initial version usually originates in a park's communications office. Staff members receive basic incident data: time of report, location, age of the individual, type of incident, and current status of the investigation. This information is entered into a standardized template. The template establishes the order in which facts appear and limits the range of language that may be used. Most press releases begin with a brief statement confirming that a fatal incident occurred. This sentence identifies the park, the general area, and the date. It avoids descriptive detail. The purpose is notification rather than explanation. Subsequent sentences provide minimal expansion, usually confined to terrain type and response actions. Word choice is guided by internal policy. Terms such as victim are often avoided in favor of individual or visitor. These neutral descriptors reduce emotional tone and legal implication. Similarly, verbs like fell, was found, or was pronounced dead are preferred over more vivid alternatives. Drafts are reviewed by supervisory staff. Park superintendents, or designated managers, verify factual accuracy and consistency with internal reports. Legal advisors may examine wording when liability or litigation is possible. This review focuses on risk management as well as clarity. When incidents involve multiple jurisdictions, coordination becomes more complex. County sheriffs, medical examiners, and search and rescue teams may issue their own statements. Park communications officers consult these agencies to align language. Discrepancies are minimized, conflicting descriptions are avoided. Time references are carefully selected. Press releases often list when the incident was reported and when the individual was located. Intermediate steps are usually omitted. This practice produces a simplified timeline that emphasizes response rather than uncertainty. Descriptions of terrain and conditions are limited. Phrases such as steep cliff, rocky area, or swift-moving water appear frequently. These general terms convey hazard without requiring detailed explanation. Technical features, such as specific rock formations or hydrological measurements, are excluded. Weather is mentioned selectively. Extreme heat, storms, or snow may be noted if relevant. Mild or typical conditions are rarely included. This choice frames environmental context without inviting speculation. Personal background is minimal. Age and hometown are sometimes listed if released by family or authorities. Occupation, travel purpose, and personal history are omitted. Privacy considerations and relevant standards guide this restraint. Direct quotations are uncommon. When included, they usually come from superintendents or incident commanders. These quotes emphasize condolences, cooperation, and safety awareness. They follow established phrasing patterns and avoid reference to investigative uncertainty. In fatal climbing or technical incidents, equipment references are limited. Statements may confirm that permits were held or routes were authorized. Detailed discussion of gear condition is deferred until investigations conclude and often never appears publicly. Medical information is restricted. Cause of death is stated only after confirmation by the medical examiner. Before that point, releases use provisional language such as appears to have died from injuries sustained. Revisions are common. Initial statements may be updated as new information becomes available. These updates are issued as separate releases or appended notes. Earlier versions are archived, but may remain accessible online, creating parallel records. Approval timelines influence content. In high-profile cases, agencies aim to release information quickly to control misinformation. Rapid preparation favors brevity and standardized language. More detailed explanations are postponed. Media inquiries shape subsequent wording. Journalists often request clarification about circumstances, warnings, or prior incidents. Responses are drafted using the same cautious framework. Answers reiterate existing facts rather than introduce new material. Social media platforms are increasingly used for dissemination. Park accounts on major platforms repost press releases in shortened form. Character limits further compress language. Links direct readers to full statements, but many users engage only with summaries. Training materials guide this communication style. Public affairs staff receive instruction on crisis communication, legal exposure, and consistency. Emphasis is placed on accuracy, neutrality, and institutional voice. Individual writing styles are discouraged. Historical press archives show continuity. Releases from the 1980s and 1990s use similar structures, though delivered through fax and print. Modern digital formats preserve the same logic. The medium has changed, but the template remains. In some cases, parks issue joint statements with other agencies. These documents undergo additional negotiation. Each organization reviews phrasing to ensure alignment with its policies. The final text reflects compromise. Terminology related to responsibility is carefully managed. Words implying fault, negligence, or error are excluded unless formally established. Phrases such as investigation is ongoing serve as placeholders for unresolved questions. Safety messaging is sometimes appended. Statements may include reminders to stay on trails, check weather, or carry water. These additions are generic and not directly linked to the incident. They function as public education rather than analysis. Differences appear between parks based on staffing and resources. Larger parks maintain dedicated communications teams. Smaller units rely on regional offices. Nevertheless, standardized guidance produces similar output. International visitors introduce translation considerations. In some cases, releases are issued in multiple languages. Translated versions prioritize literal accuracy over stylistic nuance. This can further simplify language. Internal emails related to release preparation show iterative editing. Early drafts may contain tentative phrasing. Later versions remove qualifiers. The final product presents information as settled, even when underlying files remain open. Public briefings follow similar patterns. When superintendents speak to reporters, prepared talking points guide responses. These points mirror press releases. Spontaneous elaboration is limited. Over time, this communication system produces recognizable patterns. Readers encounter familiar structures: confirmation, location, response, investigation, safety reminder. Variations are minor. This consistency shapes public perception. Incidents appear similar in form, even when circumstances differ. Language smooths variation. Complexity is reduced. The institutional voice takes precedence over individual expression. Statements speak on behalf of agencies rather than narrating events. The focus remains on verified facts and procedural posture. Through these practices, fatalities are presented as administrative occurrences within managed landscapes. The tone is restrained, information is bounded, interpretation is deferred. In this framework, language functions as a regulatory tool. It organizes attention, limits exposure, and maintains continuity. What is said publicly reflects organizational priorities as much as empirical detail. Statistics, annual reports, and aggregated narratives. Each year, national park fatalities are translated into numerical form. Individual case files, scattered across agencies and jurisdictions, are reduced to entries in spreadsheets, databases, and summary tables. Names disappear. Locations are generalized. What remains are categories, counts, and ratios intended for administrative review and policy planning. The process begins at the park level. Safety officers and administrative staff submit annual incident summaries to regional offices. These reports list total fatalities, serious injuries, and major rescue operations. Causes are grouped into predefined classifications such as falls, drownings, medical events, vehicle accidents, and environmental exposure. The structure is consistent across units. Regional offices consolidate these submissions. Park-level data are reviewed for completeness and formatting. Missing fields are flagged. Inconsistencies between internal records and summary forms are corrected. Once verified, regional datasets are forwarded to national headquarters. At headquarters, analysts integrate information into centralized systems. These systems include occupational safety databases, visitor use statistics, and law enforcement records. Fatalities involving employees and contractors are separated from visitor deaths. Each category is assigned different reporting obligations. One major repository is the Department of the Interior's Safety Management Database. This system aggregates incidents from multiple bureaus, including the National Park Service. Entries include date, park unit, general incident type, and severity level. Detailed narratives are not stored in this format. Annual public reports draw from these internal systems. Some are published as standalone safety summaries. Others appear within broader budget or performance documents. Tables and charts present trends over time. Explanatory text is limited. For example, annual NPS visitor safety reports may note that a certain percentage of deaths resulted from falls, followed by drownings and medical emergencies. The figures are compared with previous years. Increases and decreases are highlighted. Individual circumstances are not described. Standardization is central to this process. Incident types are coded using fixed definitions. A fall from a cliff, a slip on wet rock, and a tumble down a slope may all be coded under the same category. Subcategories exist but are rarely published. Classification decisions affect statistics. If a death involves both injury and medical collapse, one factor must be designated primary. This determination is often based on medical examiner findings. The chosen category influences aggregate totals. Visitor exposure is incorporated through usage metrics. Parks report annual visitation numbers. Analysts calculate fatality rates per million visitors. These rates are used in comparative assessments between parks and across years. They provide a sense of proportional risk without reference to specific sites. Search and rescue data are compiled separately. These reports list numbers of operations, personnel hours, and associated injuries or deaths. Fatalities during rescues are included in broader safety statistics. Again, narrative detail is absent. Data cleaning occurs before publication. Duplicate entries are removed. Incomplete cases are deferred. Late arriving medical determinations may be incorporated into future reports rather than current ones. This creates slight temporal shifts in datasets. Historical datasets reveal gradual change. In the 1970s and 1980s, records were maintained primarily on paper. Aggregation required manual counting. Modern systems automate these functions. As a result, contemporary reports contain more categories and cross-tabulations. Despite improved precision, aggregation reduces contextual richness. A fatal fall in Yosemite and a fatal fall in a small historical park are equivalent within national tables. Terrain, infrastructure, and visitor behavior are not represented. Annual summaries are used internally for planning. Safety programs, signage projects, and staffing allocations draw on these figures. Parks with higher incident rates may receive additional resources. The numbers influence management priorities. Congressional oversight also relies on aggregated data. Committees reviewing park safety request national statistics. Agency officials cite trends and averages in testimony. Individual cases are not discussed in this setting. Media outlets occasionally reference these reports. Articles may state that most park deaths are due to falls and drownings, citing annual figures. Such statements derive from aggregated narratives rather than from case analysis. Researchers use these datasets to conduct statistical studies. Some examine correlations between visitation, weather patterns, and incident rates. Others compare risk profiles across recreational activities. Their findings depend on classification accuracy. Limitations are acknowledged in technical appendices. Reports often note that not all incidents are captured, or that definitions may change. These caveats rarely appear in public summaries. Changes in reporting standards affect trend interpretation. When new categories are introduced or definitions revised, comparisons across decades become difficult. A reclassified category may produce apparent increases or decreases unrelated to actual conditions. Visitor demographics are inconsistently included. Age and gender may be recorded in some datasets but omitted from others. Ethnicity and socioeconomic status are generally absent. Aggregated narratives therefore lack social context. Geographic detail is similarly constrained. While internal systems may store coordinates, published reports usually reference only park names. Hotspots within parks are not identified publicly. Fatalities related to criminal activity are sometimes excluded from general safety statistics. These cases are reported separately through law enforcement channels. Their omission affects overall totals. Seasonal variation appears in some summaries. Charts may show higher incident counts in summer months. However, seasonal patterns are rarely explored in depth. They are presented as background information. Injury data are often combined with fatality data in broader safety reports. Serious injuries and deaths may appear together under severe incidents. This aggregation blurs distinctions between outcomes. Over time, repeated publication of similar tables establishes a stable narrative. Certain parks are associated with higher counts. Certain causes dominate. These patterns become institutional reference points. Within agencies, these narratives influence training and messaging. Emphasis is placed on categories with high numbers. Programs target falls, water safety, and heat exposure. Less frequent hazards receive less attention. Public understanding is shaped accordingly. Visitors encounter generalized statements about common risks. These statements originate in aggregated data. They lack connection to individual stories. The transformation from case file to statistic involves multiple filters. Classification, coding, consolidation, and publication each remove detail. What remains is optimized for overview rather than explanation. This process is not hidden. It is embedded in administrative practice. Numerical summaries are necessary for governance. They allow large systems to monitor performance, yet the resulting narratives are abstract. They portray fatalities as components of trends. Variation between incidents is flattened. Personal circumstances are invisible. Through aggregation, deaths in national parks become part of national metrics. They are counted, compared, and archived. Their significance is expressed in percentages and rates. In this form, information circulates widely. It informs budgets, policies, and public perception. At the same time, it distances observers from individual events. Statistics thus serve as both tools and screens. They enable management while reshaping meaning. They convert lived experiences into stable categories. Training, protocols, and institutional memory. Instruction within the National Park Service is shaped by accumulated experience rather than by individual incidents. New rangers enter a system where procedures have been refined over decades. Manuals, briefings, and certification programs incorporate lessons derived from previous accidents, rescues, and fatalities. These materials translate historical events into standardized practices. Initial training begins at federal and regional academies. Recruits receive instruction in emergency response, search coordination, medical assistance, and documentation. Course materials include case-based examples drawn from archived incidents. These examples are presented as operational scenarios rather than narratives. The focus is on decision points, communication flow, and procedural compliance. Field training follows classroom instruction. New rangers are paired with experienced supervisors. During this period, operational routines are demonstrated in real settings. Trainees observe how senior staff conduct patrols, issue warnings, and assess hazards. Informal references to past incidents are common. These references function as practical guidance rather than formal instruction. Written protocols are central to institutional memory. The National Park Service maintains extensive policy documents governing visitor safety, law enforcement, and emergency management. These manuals are updated periodically. Revisions are often prompted by internal reviews following major incidents. After significant fatalities or large-scale rescues, internal evaluations may be conducted. These reviews examine response timelines, equipment performance, and coordination between agencies. Findings are summarized in internal memoranda. When changes are recommended, they are incorporated into updated procedures. One example involves helicopter rescue operations. In the 1990s and early 2000s, several accidents involving rotor wash and landing zones led to revised aviation protocols. Training materials were amended to emphasize site assessment, communication with pilots, and crowd control. These changes were disseminated nationwide. Medical response training reflects similar evolution. Wilderness first responder standards, once informal, are now codified. Rangers receive certification in advanced first aid, trauma management, and evacuation techniques. Curricula incorporate data from past medical emergencies and fatalities. Search and rescue doctrine is continuously refined. Grid search methods, canine deployment procedures, and tracking techniques are adapted based on prior outcomes. After-action reports from major operations become reference documents for future planning. Seasonal briefings reinforce this accumulated knowledge. At the start of peak visitor periods, staff receive updates on recent incidents, environmental conditions, and emerging risks. These briefings often reference comparable situations from previous years. The repetition reinforces awareness. Institutional memory is also embedded in infrastructure. Warning signs, barriers, and trail modifications reflect past events. When a fatal fall occurs at a specific site, engineering and safety teams may evaluate whether physical changes are warranted. If implemented, these changes become permanent reminders of earlier incidents. Ranger handbooks include standardized checklists. These lists guide responses to lost hikers, water rescues, and medical emergencies. Each item reflects prior experience. Steps that proved critical in earlier cases are preserved. Less effective measures are removed. Informal storytelling plays a limited but persistent role. In ranger housing areas and during off-duty gatherings, senior staff sometimes recount notable incidents. These stories emphasize practical lessons, weather changes, equipment failures, or navigation errors. Over time, certain cases become part of shared professional culture. However, such informal transmission is secondary to documented training. Agency policy discourages reliance on anecdote. Official guidance is expected to come from approved sources. This reduces variation between parks. Certification requirements reinforce uniformity. Specialized roles, such as technical rescue leaders or aviation coordinators, require periodic requalification. Examinations and practical evaluations test knowledge of protocols shaped by historical incidents. Digital learning platforms now supplement traditional instruction. Online modules present scenarios based on real cases. Trainees review maps, timelines, and response choices. These modules anonymize individuals and focus on operational outcomes. Internal databases support this process. Incident management systems allow staff to search past cases by category, location, or hazard type. Training officers use these records to design exercises. The emphasis remains on pattern recognition rather than individual detail. Cross-agency collaboration influences institutional memory. Joint exercises with county sheriffs, fire departments, and emergency medical services incorporate lessons from multi-jurisdictional incidents. Shared protocols emerge from these collaborations. Review boards contribute to long-term learning. In certain cases, boards analyze fatal incidents involving employees or complex rescues. Their reports identify systemic issues. Recommendations may include equipment upgrades, staffing changes, or revised training standards. Budget allocations reflect accumulated experience. Funding for safety programs, radio systems, and rescue equipment is justified using historical incident data. Investments follow recognized patterns of risk. Turnover presents challenges. Experienced rangers retire or transfer. New personnel arrive. Manuals and databases function as repositories of collective knowledge. Regional differences persist. Mountain parks emphasize avalanche and climbing safety. Desert parks focus on heat, illness, and navigation. Coastal units prioritize water rescues. Training programs adapt accordingly while maintaining national standards. Evaluation mechanisms reinforce adherence. Supervisors assess performance during drills and real incidents. Deviations from protocol are documented. Corrective training may be assigned. This feedback loop sustains institutional practices. External audits also play a role. Periodic reviews by federal oversight bodies examine safety operations. Findings may prompt updates to training curricula. These audits rely heavily on historical incident records. Technology influences memory retention. Body camera footage and GPS tracks are used in training debriefs. Trainees review recordings to study movement patterns and communication. These materials provide precise references that replace reliance on recollection. Legal developments affect instruction. Court rulings related to liability or duty of care can lead to procedural changes. Training materials are revised to reflect new standards. Past incidents are reinterpreted through updated legal frameworks. Documentation standards are part of training. Rangers learn how to write reports that meet administrative requirements. This ensures that future staff will have usable records. Institutional memory depends on consistent documentation. Public feedback occasionally influences protocols. Complaints, inquiries, and media scrutiny following incidents may trigger internal review. While public narratives are not incorporated directly into training, they can prompt examination of existing practices. Over decades, these mechanisms produce continuity. Procedures reflect layers of prior experience. Each generation of staff inherits a framework shaped by earlier outcomes. Institutional memory within the park system is therefore structured. It is preserved through manuals, certifications, databases, and infrastructure. Individual recollections matter less than recorded precedent. Fatal incidents contribute to this structure indirectly. Their details are abstracted into lessons and rules. Personal circumstances are stripped away. What remains is operational guidance. Through this process, past events influence present behavior without being retold in full. They persist as protocols, warnings, and routines embedded in daily work. Families, notifications, and administrative communication. When a fatality occurs in a national park, communication with family members begins through formal channels rather than through park staff alone. Responsibility for next-of-kin notification typically rests with local law enforcement or county authorities. Rangers may assist by providing identification documents, contact information, or last known addresses, but they rarely deliver initial death notifications unless designated by jurisdictional agreement. The first step involves confirming identity. Personal identification, vehicle registration, permit records, or companion statements are reviewed. In some cases, fingerprinting or dental records are required. Until identity is verified, notifications are delayed. Incident files reflect this stage, with entries noting pending identification or awaiting confirmation. Once identity is established, notification is coordinated. County sheriffs or police departments usually assign trained officers to conduct in-person visits. These officers follow departmental protocols that specify time, location, and documentation requirements. Telephone notification is used only when in-person delivery is impossible. Park officials are informed when notification has been completed. This confirmation allows agencies to release names publicly. Until then, press statements refer only to age and gender. The timing of family notification therefore determines when personal details enter public records. Initial contact focuses on factual confirmation. Officers communicate that a death has occurred, identify the location, and provide basic information about circumstances. Detailed explanations are avoided. Families are told that investigations are ongoing and that further information will follow. In cases involving foreign nationals, embassies and consulates are contacted. The U.S. Department of State coordinates with local authorities. Notification procedures follow international agreements. Language interpretation services are arranged when necessary. After initial notification, administrative communication shifts to designated liaison personnel. Many parks assign victim assistance coordinators or trained staff members to serve as points of contact. These individuals do not conduct investigations. Their role is informational and procedural. Families receive written correspondence outlining available records, personal property recovery procedures, and contact numbers. This correspondence is standardized. Templates ensure consistent language across cases. Letters avoid interpretive statements and focus on process. Personal belongings recovered at scenes are inventoried. Items may include backpacks, cameras, phones, wallets, and clothing. These are logged, secured, and transferred to evidence storage. Release to families requires verification of identity and completion of forms. In some cases, items are held until investigations conclude. When deaths occur in remote areas, recovery may take days. During this period, families may receive limited updates. Agencies provide general status reports without operational detail. Communication frequency varies depending on complexity and staffing. Medical examiner offices communicate separately. Families are informed about autopsy schedules, toxicology testing, and death certificate issuance. These processes are governed by state regulations. Park staff are not authorized to provide medical findings. Requests for reports are common. Families may seek incident summaries, ranger narratives, and investigative conclusions. Agencies provide instructions for submitting formal requests. Some documents are released automatically. Others require public records applications. Privacy regulations affect what families receive. While next of kin have broader access than the general public, certain materials remain restricted. Witness identities, internal deliberations, and security-related information may be withheld. In prolonged investigations, communication becomes intermittent. Families may wait months for final determinations. Agencies issue updates when milestones occur, such as receipt of toxicology results or closure of case files. Interim silence is common. Legal representation influences interactions. When families retain attorneys, communication is routed through legal counsel. Agencies limit direct contact. Records requests are handled through formal channels. Informal updates decrease. Support services are sometimes offered. County victim assistance programs may provide counseling referrals, travel coordination, or funeral assistance information. National parks themselves do not administer long-term support programs, but they may supply contact lists. Cultural and religious considerations are addressed when possible. Some families request expedited release of remains for burial. Medical examiner offices evaluate these requests within legal constraints. Park involvement is limited to facilitating coordination. In mass casualty incidents, communication structures expand. Incident command systems designate family liaison officers. Information centers may be established. Briefings follow scheduled intervals. These measures are rarely required for single fatalities. Documentation of family contact is maintained. Case files include records of notification times, names of officers, and methods used. Subsequent communications are logged. These records demonstrate procedural compliance. Disputes occasionally arise. Families may challenge official conclusions or request reinvestigation. Agencies respond through established review mechanisms. Additional examinations may be authorized in limited circumstances. Outcomes are documented. Media attention affects communication patterns. In high-profile cases, families may receive inquiries from journalists. Agencies advise relatives about privacy options and media relations. Public affairs offices coordinate messaging. Language barriers complicate some cases. Translation services are used for written and verbal communication. Delays may occur when certified interpreters are required. Records reflect these accommodations. Financial matters intersect with communication. Recovery costs, transportation fees, and storage charges may be addressed. Some expenses are covered by county or state programs. Others are billed to families. Policies vary by jurisdiction. Death certificates mark a transition. Once issued, families can pursue legal and administrative processes, such as insurance claims and estate matters. Agencies often notify relatives when certificates are available. Long-term correspondence is limited. After files are closed and records released, routine contact usually ends. Some families maintain informal relationships with park staff. These interactions are personal and not part of official systems. Archival records preserve these exchanges. Emails, letters, and call logs are stored alongside investigative documents. Future reviewers may see evidence of communication without access to full conversations. Historical files show continuity in these practices. Correspondence from earlier decades contains similar templates and procedural language. Methods have changed, but administrative structure remains consistent. Technology has altered delivery methods. Secure email portals and electronic forms supplement postal mail. Digital signatures are accepted. These tools increase efficiency but also formalize interaction. Training for staff involved in family communication emphasizes neutrality and accuracy. Emotional support is acknowledged as important, but employees are instructed to avoid speculation or personal interpretation. Boundaries are maintained. Organizational liability considerations influence tone. Communications are carefully phrased to avoid admissions of fault. Legal review may occur before certain documents are released. This review prioritizes institutional protection. As a result, families encounter a structured system. Information arrives in stages. Access depends on forms and procedures. Interaction is mediated by multiple offices. This system provides predictability. It ensures that notifications are delivered, records are preserved, and requests are processed. At the same time, it limits flexibility. Individual circumstances are filtered through standardized channels. Within national park fatality cases, family communication is therefore administrative in nature. It is guided by policy, jurisdiction, and legal constraint. Personal engagement is secondary to procedural compliance. Through this framework, agencies manage obligations to relatives while maintaining institutional boundaries. Communication is recorded, regulated, and concluded according to established rules. Reviews, reopenings, and the question of finality. Case files in national park fatality investigations are formally closed when required reports are completed, medical determinations are finalized, and administrative reviews are finished. Closure is marked in internal systems with status codes and archival designations. At this point, active investigation ceases, and routine access becomes limited. Despite this designation, closure does not always represent permanent resolution. Certain cases are revisited months or years later. Reopenings occur through defined administrative and legal mechanisms. These processes are uncommon but embedded within agency structures. One pathway involves internal review. Supervisory staff may request reassessment when new information emerges. This may include delayed toxicology results, newly discovered physical evidence, or discrepancies identified during audits. In such situations, case status can be changed from closed to active review. Internal reviews are typically conducted by personnel who were not directly involved in the original investigation. This separation is intended to reduce bias. Reviewers examine original reports, evidence, inventories, and correspondence. Their task is to determine whether procedures were followed and whether conclusions remain supported. Findings from these reviews are documented in memoranda. These documents summarize concerns, outline additional steps taken, and recommend either reaffirmation or modification of prior determinations. Most reviews result in confirmation of original findings. Revisions are less frequent. External triggers also prompt reconsideration. Families may submit formal petitions requesting re-evaluation. These petitions often cite perceived inconsistencies, missing evidence, or alternative interpretations. Agencies respond by assessing whether the petition presents materially new information. When petitions are received, they are routed to regional or national offices. Legal counsel is consulted. A threshold assessment determines whether reopening is warranted. If the petition is denied, written justification is provided. Judicial proceedings constitute another avenue. In wrongful death lawsuits or civil claims, discovery processes may uncover previously undisclosed material. Depositions and expert testimony can introduce new perspectives. Courts may order agencies to review findings in light of this information. In rare cases, judicial rulings directly affect case status. If procedural violations are identified, agencies may be required to conduct supplemental investigations. These investigations are limited in scope and focus on specific deficiencies. Independent expert review occurs in certain circumstances. External specialists in mountaineering safety, forensic pathology, or accident reconstruction may be consulted. Their assessments are appended to files. These reviews are typically commissioned during litigation or high-profile inquiries. Technological developments occasionally reopen cases. Improvements in digital forensics, satellite imagery, and geolocation analysis allow re-evaluation of past evidence. Older cases with incomplete tracking data may be re-examined using newer tools. In 2018, for example, advances in mobile phone data analysis enabled investigators in several wilderness cases nationwide to reconstruct movement patterns more precisely than was previously possible. Such reconstructions can clarify timelines but rarely overturn fundamental conclusions. Administrative audits also generate reassessment. Periodic evaluations of safety and law enforcement programs examine closed cases for compliance. When irregularities are found, selected files are reopened for corrective review. Reopened cases follow structured procedures. A new case number extension is assigned. Supplementary reports are generated. Prior documentation is retained but marked as superseded when necessary. All actions are logged. Communication about reopenings is limited. Agencies do not routinely issue public notices unless conclusions change. Families are notified when reviews begin and when outcomes are reached. Media announcements are uncommon. Revisions to cause or manner of death are documented through amended death certificates. These amendments require medical examiner approval and are governed by state law. Once issued, amended certificates replace earlier versions in official records. Statistical systems are updated accordingly. Revised classifications are entered into national databases. These updates may affect historical totals in subsequent reports. Earlier publications are rarely retroactively corrected. Not all requests lead to formal reopening. Many inquiries are resolved through explanatory correspondence. Agencies provide clarifications based on existing records. These responses reaffirm closure without altering status. Resource constraints influence decisions. Reinvestigation requires staff time, travel, and administrative support. Agencies weigh these demands against the likelihood of substantive findings. This assessment is part of reopening determinations. Political and public attention can accelerate reviews. High-profile incidents attracting sustained media coverage may receive additional scrutiny. Congressional inquiries or Inspector General reviews may be initiated. These processes operate independently of routine case management. Inspector General investigations represent a distinct mechanism. The Department of the Interior's Office of Inspector General examines allegations of misconduct, mismanagement, or procedural failure. Their reports may recommend reopening specific cases. Such investigations focus on institutional performance rather than individual outcomes. They assess whether policies were followed, whether evidence was handled appropriately, and whether reporting was accurate. Case conclusions may be affected indirectly. Historical precedent influences current practice. Earlier controversies have led to strengthened review procedures. For example, cases involving disputed recoveries or equipment failures have resulted in enhanced documentation standards. Time affects evidentiary value. Physical evidence degrades. Witness memories fade. Digital records may become obsolete. These factors limit the scope of later review. Most reopenings rely primarily on documentary analysis. Families sometimes pursue independent investigations. Private investigators, forensic consultants, and technical experts may be hired. Their findings are submitted to agencies or courts. Agencies evaluate these materials using established criteria. Differences between private and official assessments are common. Private reports may emphasize alternative scenarios. Official reviews assess whether such scenarios are supported by verifiable evidence. Unsupported speculation is not adopted. International cases introduce additional complexity. When foreign nationals are involved, consular authorities may request re-evaluation. Diplomatic channels facilitate information exchange. Jurisdictional boundaries remain controlling. Archival policies shape long-term review potential. Some records are sealed for extended periods. Others become publicly accessible after retention thresholds. Later researchers may uncover overlooked details through archival access. Academic studies occasionally revisit past incidents. Scholars analyzing risk patterns may identify anomalies. These findings may prompt agencies to reassess classifications. Such cases are rare. Internal culture emphasizes closure. Operational systems are designed to resolve cases efficiently. Prolonged uncertainty is viewed as administratively undesirable. This orientation influences review practices. Nevertheless, formal mechanisms remain available. Policies recognize that new evidence can emerge. Procedures for reopening are codified. Staff are trained to follow them. Documentation from reopened cases shows similar structure to original files. Supplemental sections are added. Earlier conclusions are referenced. Rationales for change are articulated. The record becomes layered. In most instances, reopenings confirm existing determinations. Adjustments are minor. The fundamental classification remains unchanged. These outcomes reinforce institutional confidence in initial processes. Occasionally, however, revisions occur. Causes are reclassified. Contributing factors are modified. These changes are recorded without commentary. They enter databases quietly. Public awareness of such revisions is limited. Without litigation or media attention, amended findings remain within administrative systems. They are visible primarily to specialists and researchers. The possibility of review influences initial investigations. Knowing that files may later be scrutinized encourages thorough documentation. Supervisors emphasize accuracy, partly for this reason. As years pass, closed cases accumulate. Most remain untouched. A small fraction undergo renewed examination. This imbalance reflects structural priorities. Within this environment, finality is procedural rather than absolute. A case may be closed, archived, and referenced as resolved. Yet, formal avenues exist for reconsideration when justified. These avenues are shaped by law, policy, and institutional capacity. They operate slowly and selectively. They favor documented evidence over narrative reinterpretation. Through these mechanisms, agencies manage uncertainty over time. Closure is maintained, but it is not immutable. Records remain open to limited revision under controlled conditions. Public memory, digital archives, and the persistence of unanswered records. Long after investigations are closed and administrative processes end, information about fatal incidents continues to circulate in digital environments. These environments include government websites, newspaper databases, social media platforms, private archives, and independent research forums. Together, they form a secondary record that exists outside formal agency systems. The foundation of this record is official publication. Press releases, annual reports, and court filings are uploaded to public servers. Many remain accessible for years. Even when agencies update or remove pages, archived copies often persist through web preservation services. Media organizations contribute extensively. Local newspapers, national outlets, and broadcast networks maintain online archives. Articles describing park fatalities are stored with metadata, headlines, and timestamps. Some publications retain open access. Others place older material behind paywalls. In both cases, the information remains retrievable. Digital news aggregation services further expand circulation. These platforms republish or summarize articles from multiple sources. As a result, a single incident may appear in dozens of online locations. Variations in wording and emphasis accumulate over time. Court records are another source. When litigation occurs, filings are uploaded to public databases. These documents include depositions, expert reports, and evidentiary exhibits. They often contain information not present in media coverage. Access depends on jurisdiction and platform. Public records portals provide additional material. Agencies publish released documents online after responding to information requests. These portals may host redacted reports, correspondence, and photographs. Files are often stored as scanned PDFs with limited search functionality. Academic repositories occasionally include analyses of park safety and mortality. Researchers may upload datasets or studies that reference individual incidents. These materials are usually anonymized, but may be traceable through contextual clues. Social media platforms represent a distinct layer. Posts, comments, and shared articles create informal archives. Family members, Visitors and observers may write about incidents. Photographs and videos sometimes circulate. These materials are rarely curated or verified. Online memorial pages also contribute. Some families create tribute sites or social media profiles in memory of deceased relatives. These pages may include personal accounts, timelines, and correspondence. They exist independently of official documentation. Discussion forums and independent websites focus on wilderness safety, hiking, or missing persons. Contributors collect news articles, public records, and personal observations. Over time, these sites compile extensive case summaries. Editorial standards vary widely. Search engine algorithms shape visibility. Older cases may resurface when users search related terms. Automated related articles features link incidents across parks and years. This creates associative networks that were not intended by original authors. Digital preservation services play a central role. Organizations dedicated to archiving web content periodically capture snapshots of government and media pages. These snapshots remain accessible even after originals are modified. Researchers rely on these services to trace document evolution. Version differences are common. Early press releases may differ from later updates. Comparisons reveal changes in age, location, or cause of death descriptions. Metadata errors also propagate. Incorrect dates, spellings, or locations can be replicated across platforms. Once indexed, such errors are difficult to correct. Official corrections may not reach all secondary sites. Language barriers affect memory as well. International coverage may translate incidents into other languages. Translations introduce variation. Some omit technical details. Others add interpretive elements. These versions circulate within separate digital ecosystems. Commercial databases aggregate information for professional users. Subscription-based platforms compile news, legal records, and government documents. These systems enable cross-referencing but remain inaccessible to most of the public. Libraries maintain digital collections. Many partner with newspapers and government agencies to preserve local reporting. These collections often include materials no longer available elsewhere. Access policies differ by institution. The cumulative effect is multiplicity. No single authoritative digital record exists. Instead, overlapping fragments persist across platforms. Each reflects the priorities and limitations of its source. Over time, patterns emerge. Certain incidents are frequently cited, others fade. High-profile cases remain prominent in search results. Less publicized deaths become difficult to locate without targeted effort. Algorithmic ranking reinforces this imbalance. Search engines prioritize pages with high traffic and backlinks. Archived government reports may appear lower in results, despite greater accuracy. Data longevity varies. Some websites close, domains expire, content disappears. However, cached versions and third-party archives often retain copies. Loss is partial rather than complete. Digital storage capacity has expanded rapidly. Agencies and media outlets rarely delete old material for technical reasons. As a result, decades of incident-related information remain online. Organizational incentives favor retention. Privacy regulations impose some limits. Certain records are removed after court orders or policy changes. Names may be redacted, photographs may be withdrawn, yet copies frequently persist elsewhere. Researchers navigating this landscape must reconcile inconsistencies. Timelines derived from digital sources may conflict with official files. Dates may differ. Descriptions may evolve. Resolving these differences requires cross-verification. Independent analysts sometimes compile longitudinal datasets from public sources. They extract dates, locations, and classifications. These datasets circulate within research communities. Methodologies vary. Errors may be inherited from source material. Educational institutions use digital archives in teaching. Students examine case histories through online records. Their understanding is shaped by what remains accessible. Absent material cannot be evaluated. Families sometimes encounter unexpected persistence. Articles and documents about relatives may appear in searches years later. Removal is difficult. Most platforms prioritize archival integrity over individual preferences. Legal frameworks offer limited remedies. Right to be forgotten statutes apply in some jurisdictions, but not broadly in the United States. Government records are generally exempt. Media archives are protected by press freedoms. Technological change continues to affect access. Artificial intelligence systems now index and summarize large document collections. These tools can retrieve obscure references. At the same time, they may amplify inaccuracies. Long-term preservation strategies are uneven. Some agencies actively curate digital archives, others rely on legacy systems. File formats become obsolete. Migration projects attempt to prevent data loss. Institutional memory intersects with public memory in these spaces. Official summaries coexist with informal commentary. Administrative language appears alongside personal reflections. Neither fully displaces the other. Historical distance alters interpretation. As years pass, incidents are referenced primarily through digital traces. Living witnesses become fewer. Archived documents gain relative authority. Patterns in online discussion reflect broader interests. Topics such as cliff falls, disappearances, or unusual circumstances attract sustained attention. Digital memory mirrors selective curiosity. Open-source investigators occasionally revisit old cases using online material. They assemble timelines from disparate sources. Their work may attract attention. Agencies rarely engage unless new evidence emerges. Public understanding therefore develops independently of administrative closure. Records remain visible. Interpretations evolve. New audiences encounter old material without institutional context. In this environment, unresolved elements persist. Gaps in documentation are not filled by time. They become part of the digital landscape. Absence itself is preserved. The accumulation of archives does not guarantee clarity. It produces volume rather than resolution. More material exists, but it is dispersed and uneven. What endures most reliably are structural elements: dates, locations, official classifications, and brief descriptions. These anchors remain consistent across platforms. Surrounding detail varies. Digital preservation ensures that national park fatalities are not confined to internal files. They continue to appear in searchable spaces. Their records circulate long after administrative processes conclude. This circulation is not directed by a single authority. It results from interconnected systems of storage, indexing, and reproduction. As a result, the public record remains open-ended. Information accumulates, interpretations shift, some details become fixed, others remain uncertain. In the absence of comprehensive narrative closure, digital archives function as repositories of partial histories. They hold official documents, media accounts, and personal traces together. These materials coexist without synthesis. Readers assemble meaning from what they encounter. Different paths through the archive produce different understandings. Over time, this distributed memory becomes the most enduring form of record. It outlasts administrative cycles and personnel changes. It persists through technological transitions. The final state of these cases is therefore not silence. It is continued availability in fragmented form. Files remain searchable. References continue to circulate. What survives is a layered record composed of official statements, numerical summaries, procedural documents, and informal commentary. Together, they form a lasting digital presence. In this condition, deaths in national parks remain part of an evolving informational environment. They are preserved not as unified stories, but as interconnected traces that remain accessible to anyone who looks for them. If you want more deep investigations like this, subscribe now, turn on notifications, and share this video with someone who needs to see it. The truth doesn't stay buried unless we let it.